and welcome to the High Pulse podcast. I'm your host, Rosie Nishanyan. My guest today is Emily Simonian. Emily is a singer-songwriter originally from Southern California, but now based in the Washington, D.C. area. Her new musical, When Two of Us Meet, was awarded the 2024 Armenian International Women's Association's Laurel Karabian Fund for the Arts grant and was named a semifinalist for the 2026 Eugene O'Neill Theater Center's National Music Theater Conference. The musical made its stage debut in July at Penn Arts in Pensacola, Florida. Hi, Emily. Thanks so much for joining me.
Hi, Rosie. Thanks for having me.
So the last time I interviewed you was actually for the Armenian Weekly in spring of last year, and you had just finished putting on a concert of the songs from the first act of your musical, When Two of Us Meet, in New York City. And now the full show is making its stage debut in Florida. That's so exciting.
I'm so excited and so thrilled. I just can't tell you enough what a journey this has been just to get to this point of getting this up on stage. So it's really cool.
Awesome. Yeah. So why don't you start by telling us briefly about what the show is about?
Sure. When Two of Us Meet follows the story of my paternal grandfather, Alec, and his family immigrating from Armenia to the US in the early 20th century. And it follows five different family members' stories, their adventures and misadventures, getting from this tiny village in Armenia all the way to Los Angeles. And the story is from the perspective of Alec, who is the middle son, and he's a teenager in this story. And his family went through a lot. It's based on a true story, and the takeaway of the whole thing is the resilience of the human spirit.
So since the story came from your family, how would you recommend other artists, mind their family for stories and how to tell those stories?
The biggest piece for me in trying to put together a true story was collaboration, right? It's coming from my dad, who heard the stories from his grandparents, from his father, and then passed them down to me. So there was that piece of it. Anything, obviously, that is recorded, written accounts or records, right? But if it's, just verbal pieces of history from other family members, that's amazing. Something that I had to do when pieces of the story weren't really coming together. My dad would forget parts of it or say, I don't really remember. I don't know if I asked my grandmother that or something like that. I actually went to other Armenians that are like family friends in the community that I know immigrated with my ancestors and asked them, hey, we're missing pieces of this, part of our family history or story. Do you remember anything? Did you hear anything from your family? So it's very collaborative.
That's so interesting that you went to other people in the community to find those stories. I wouldn't have thought to do that. So that's super interesting.
Yeah, well, a piece of our family history is kind of a mystery. And so there was a lot of questions for me and needing to really get creative with thinking about where to go to possibly get information. So had to think on my toes.
And the name When Two of Us Meet comes from the William Saroyan quote, right? So why did you choose that name and how has his work been influential in your work?
I've always loved that quote. I think so many of us do. I think it perfectly and beautifully describes the Armenian diaspora, the Armenian spirit, our resilience, our perseverance. It's sort of a tribute to his work and to that quote. And that quote is the essence of the entire musical. That is the so what of it all. The power of our culture and our sense of community as Armenians anywhere in the world.
I love that. Stories, especially family stories, can come in so many different forms and so many different mediums. So what made you turn this into a musical as opposed to an album or a novel or, a short story or a film, anything like that?
Mm-hmm. Originally, I was going to turn the story into a novel like years back. And I think I've told you before, my sisters and I kind of not fought, but had words about who was going to do something with this story because there are so many interesting pieces to it, right? This story, I always knew I wanted to do something with it creatively to share it with the world. Um, and on a different note, I knew that I always wanted to write a musical. That was something that was on my bucket list, and putting the two ideas together and deciding, oh, wait a minute, I have this story that I want to do something with. I have always wanted to write a musical. Here's where it converges, right? I think that came to me rewatching Les Mis, seeing it on stage, or watching that movie when it came out. The most current version, which was like 2012, but Les Mis was a huge inspiration for this piece because it has a lot of the same core themes and that big sort of historical, cultural resilience piece to it, right? So I think there was a connection there for me in seeing something that reminded me, oh, this story could look really good in this medium, in the musical theater medium.
It's funny though too because Les Mis is based on a book, and there's a lot on Broadway right now. The most successful shows end up being very IP based, but there are a lot of original shows that are gaining a lot of traction. So, for you, what's the importance of bringing original stories to the stage and Armenian stories specifically?
I think IP based stories, musicals will get people to the door. And that's why they're so frequently done and sometimes so successful. But I also think that as a general audience, we crave new stories and new characters and different perspectives. And that different perspective is the real missing piece here, especially in the musical theater canon. I think Armenian stories have not been represented at all. Yes, on stage, and that's wonderful, but musical theater specifically, not at all. So I think there's room for everybody, and hopefully, more audiences can see musical theater pieces that center around Armenian stories.
Obviously, I love musical theater and plays as well. And there are so many ways, you see other people's stories and you can relate, but then when you see an Armenian show and it's like, wow, that feels like my story. I can see my family up there. Walk me through the process, if you can, of creating a musical from, having that original initial idea to now it's on stage fully for the first time.
So it is not a linear process. I'll just start with that. I, obviously started writing it, step one. And, there were lots of rewrites, and it took me probably about 4 years off and on. Sometimes I was running with it, sometimes I was walking. But after I finished that first draft, I knew, okay, now we need to do a workshop. We need to hear it and see it and, get it up on its feet, so to speak. So I applied for a grant through AWA, thinking maybe they can help with getting this up on stage in some way, shape, or form for its first presentation. And I was so grateful and shocked and surprised and honored to receive the grant in 2024. And so they helped put it up on stage and do a concert reading. You were there, and that was step one, right? Just to let people know, okay, this piece of work exists, and even more importantly, at that early stage, for me to hear it and kind of decide what's working, what isn't, what are people responding to, what are they not responding to. Step one, right? And very shortly after that first concert reading, we had another concert reading with the embassy in Washington, D.C., wanting to kind of, also share the work. So that was great. I had two opportunities to hear it. And then I went into rewrites. I worked with different professional playwrights in the field and got a couple dramaturgical reviews. And that was the biggest step for me so far, is getting professional feedback, making some huge changes to the entire script and score, which then led to a small theater out of Pensacola, Florida, hearing about the musical, reading the script, and saying that they wanted to take it on for their 2026 season. And now here we are. We're going to do a staged presentation of it in about 4 weeks in Pensacola, Florida.
That's huge. Oh my gosh. So what surprised you most about that whole process?
Well, the timing of it surprised me because I'm a realist and, I've worked in multiple creative fields for a while. And so I know it's kind of a waiting game and you need patience and you need to believe in the work, but know that it might not happen right away. So I think just the response from finishing the first draft in July to receiving, that grant, that kind of stamp of approval from AWA in September, it was like whiplash. Like, what? Already? I was getting ready to wait for years for anybody to say anything about this, right? So, number one, like, I'm so grateful that there's been a positive response so early on, so that I don't have to be in my head and be waiting and get all neurotic
Yep.
about it, right? I mean, I did that anyway, but yeah, so that was surprising. And I think personally, like on a personal note, it surprised me that I loved the process of creating a musical, writing a musical so much that now I want to continue. Um, that wasn't really the plan. It was a bucket list kind of passion project thing. Like, I'm going to write this one musical, but now I'm in the process of, collaborating with other people in the field and writing more musicals.
That's so exciting. As a creative, you're always in the process of creating new stuff. And so you're also coming out with new music at the same time as you are finishing up this musical, like Nine Lives and Body Language just came out. So how do you balance that creation of new music with the continuing development of the show? Does it act as kind of like another creative outlet while you're in more of the logistical fine tuning of the show?
You nailed it. Absolutely. Balancing it can be difficult, but it hasn't been so far just because I'm always writing, right? I don't like to just sit around. So it keeps me busy because a lot of the logistical piece of getting a show up and running, I'm kind of in a phase now where I'm just like waiting for the show to, be presented in July. And so in those moments where there isn't much going on, I'm not rewriting. I want to be working on something else, and I still really love pop music. I love pop songwriting. So it's been a really good creative outlet for me as I'm waiting for my other projects to materialize.
In this final stages of When Two of Us Meet, since you're the writer and the creator, it's now more in the hands of the director and the actors and the stage crew, right, of rehearsing and getting all the production stuff set up, right? So what's that been like working with them? Or is it a little more like, okay, they do their thing now, I come in every once in a while to review?
Great question. So I haven't been involved creatively in the process, like, as an assistant director or producer or anything like that. I licensed the show to this theater and they're taking it and running with it. So I'm showing up to see
Wow.
it. I'm showing up for rehearsals. Some rehearsals, I'm not going to be there from the very beginning. I'm going to let them do their thing. But it's been interesting because at the very beginning, it was hard to let go of it. It was hard to say, okay, here you go. You do it now. And I just trust what you're going to do. It's the first time I've ever given my show like this, right? So I might have more to say on that in about 6 weeks when we're done, but it's been very nice. It's been, low stress to just be able to get on a plane and show up and see what they've done. I'm sure they're going to do a great job. I love the team. I've, been working with them, getting the materials and doing different press things. And they're great. So I'm sure they're just going to absolutely crush it.
And you also mentioned you're constantly writing too. So something that I've noticed in covering arts and culture is that a lot of artists end up working in multiple media. And I think it's important, especially for young creatives, to know that you don't have to just do one thing or be one thing or one kind of artist. So for you, how did being a singer-songwriter help with developing this musical, which is, there is the musical component, but it's also a completely different art form?
hmm The composition skills were already there because that's what I studied in undergrad when I went to music school. I knew how to basically write a song. There's a formula for a pop song, and you get very skilled at creating hooks and trying to create compelling music. So that small piece was there. I was naive enough to think that that was enough, but there is so much more that goes into writing a musical, book, music, and lyrics. The book piece of it, writing a libretto, writing a script, that was a first for me. And so I was sort of building the plane as I was flying it and knowing, okay, I need to study now. I need to go back to school. I need to learn. And so where I chose to go was a great organization online called Musical Writers. They have an academy. I went to their, webinars. I used their materials online. I joined their writing groups and tried to sharpen that skill and learn, how do you write a musical? I could write a bunch of songs and string them together, which I did, but it's more than that.
That's fascinating. The importance of always learning and using those skills to learn new skills and bring everything together is very important.
Yes, truly.
Okay, so now it's time for our high takes round. So a bit of a lightning round on all things Armenian arts and culture.
Okay.
So it'll be quick questions and answers. Are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
So one piece of Armenian art that you think our listeners should check out.
My Name is Aram by William Saroyan. I love Saroyan's work, as I mentioned before, but I think that he has a unique skill for tackling difficult subjects and being able to do so with warmth and compassion. And that story specifically really does a great job of showing somebody who is between cultures. And I think that's very interesting, especially, for the Armenian diaspora.
Awesome. And one word that describes being Armenian to you?
Community. I think we have such a strong sense of community. Again, this is part of the inspiration for When Two of Us Meet. Going again back to, the quote, the title of the show. I would be shocked if an Armenian out there disagrees with me. I feel like we must all think that, right? Our communities are so vibrant and so big and so warm. Everybody's family to us, right? And we come from these big families.
I 100% agree. I would not disagree with that at all. So right on the money. Okay, is one Armenian artist or cultural icon that inspires you?
My knee-jerk reaction is to say Cher. And I know she's super famous and, everybody knows Cher. I wish that I could think of somebody that we don't know yet, but Cher has been such an influence on me and my work. And to look at an artist like her with the longevity of her career and being on stage and being in movies and TV and being a recording artist, I'm just constantly in awe of her and will always be.
And then one piece of advice for aspiring artists.
Don't stay in your lane. Everybody says stay in your lane, and I know they are saying that trying to be helpful. But I say don't stay in your lane. There are no lanes. You do you. If you feel inspired to do something, to write something, to try something different, you go for it.
And what is something that you wish the world understood about Armenian culture?
Well, my first, honestly, my first reaction to that, and this is kind of silly and kind of cheeky, is I wish that people knew where it was. I don't know if you find that, but I have found so frequently that people say, where is that? Wait, oh, is that the Middle East? Oh, wait, is that Eastern Europe? And it's like, no, actually, it's a totally different part of the world. It's its own thing. It's, the Caucasus. So sometimes I wish people just, kind of knew a little bit more about literally where we are on the map.
Here, here. I get a lot of Albania. No, not Albania.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Emily. Thank you so much for joining me. This has been a wonderful conversation. And break a leg in Florida.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.